Story 1. A big, delicious pizza after work on a Friday night. Felt so satisfying to bring that treat home. Story 2. I bought a set of wall clippers for $19.35 after a 10% off deal from Kmart in 1995. I have not paid for a haircut since. I have saved thousands of dollars on haircuts. I used the same clippers this past Sunday. Story 3. I once found a $20 bill on my way to work. For lunch, I decided to treat myself with my newfound fortune at Subway. Nothing fancy. When I got to the cashier, the person in front of me, a mother and her child, were unable to pay for their lunch. The total was $19.90, so I decided to use the $20 to help them get their food. Well spent, if you ask me. Story 4. I bought my friend fake black roses and included a note that said, "I love you until the last rose dies." That really cheesy sentiment. She passed away, and her family kept the roses as a memento. They sit right on their kitchen table. Story 5. Bought a very inexpensive helmet for even less in my home country. It still protected my head when I crashed my bike. Story 6. A bath tray. It is not much, but it makes me happy to watch my shows, eat gummy bears, and drink wine after a long day. Story 7. Immediately after Revenge of the Sith, my two friends and I went to Walmart to buy new lightsaber toys. One friend did not have the $19.99 for the new glowing ones, but I had an extra $20 my grandmother gave me in my wallet pocket. We all got our lightsabers and fought in the neighborhood street for hours. We are still very good friends. Story 8. It depends on the decade. 30 years ago, I could feed the whole family with $20. Now, I can barely feed myself. Story 9. My sister adopted her cat, Sully, because he has some health issues, including epilepsy. He is literally the sweetest cat and loves to purr and snuggle with people. It was a great use of $20. Story 10. I still have an old Jaws t-shirt that I bought at Universal Studios back in the 1990s. Still fits and I still wear it. Nowadays, I spend $30 on a shirt, and it becomes unwearable after a couple of years. Story 11. When your partner is mad at you, treat yourself to lunch at the place they dislike but you love. Honestly, it is the best $20 you will spend. Story 12. Bought a Fire Stick years ago when they were $19.99, and it still works for the back bedroom television. Story 13. From the Earth to the Moon is a Tom Hanks docudrama series about the Apollo landing. It covers the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. Based on A Man on the Moon by Neil Armstrong. Phenomenal. Story 14. Wall electric razor from Target. 18 years later, it still magically works. I have not oiled it in at least 10 years. Story 15. I once bought an entire zip, of Shake and Keef from my long-term dealer for $20. I made a lot of very potent canna butter with it and gave most to my mom to give to her best friend who was going through chemotherapy. I kept a couple of pounds for myself and made many baked goods. I got high like a classy boulder for weeks. Story 16. I bet my grandma, who was 63 at the time, that she couldn't climb out of the bathroom window. Well, it turns out she could and did it. She is not thin, about 5 feet 3 inches tall, and 165 pounds. The window was about 5 feet off the ground and measured approximately 18 by 36 inches. I still don't know how she did it. It was by far the hardest anyone in my family has laughed in my memory. Story 17. My cat. $20 donation. And now I have what I believe to be a bog witch trapped in a cat's body who is physically incapable of dying. Story 18. I bought a belt from a bookstore 17 years ago for about $20. I have worn that belt nearly every day since then, and it is still going strong. Story 19. A genuine Pokemon Silver cartridge. I was not paying $40 to $50 for a single cartridge. Patience paid off. Story 20. A dose of acid for my brother and me to take for the night. $10 a drop, but the best part was that the guy selling was drunk and squeezed the whole dropper. Easily over $100 worth on 2 gummies. Let's just say the night was fantastic. Story 21. In Subic Bay, Philippines, I had so much fun on $20 during Liberty with my shipmates. I don't quite remember the details. Story 22. Eye protection cost about $13. The same week I got the glasses, I was weed whacking and kicked a small rock up. I saw it in slow motion come straight for my eyes. It bounced off the glasses with no harm done. I use them for basically all outdoor activities now. Story 23. Affordable headlamp to wear when doing chores or work outside at night. I use it for tasks around the house, and having my hands free instead of holding a flashlight makes everything go much more smoothly. Story 24. We paid $20 for our foster failed shelter dog. He saved me from a dark season of loneliness, and I love him with my whole heart. Story 25. Manhattan, late night after the bar, street vendor lamb over rice, red sauce, white sauce. If you know, you know. Story 26. My friend took me out to a strip club on the bartender's last day, so we drank for free. I tipped him $20. We brought back 2 of the women to my place for a 4-day stay, and they supplied the drugs. Story 27. In the late 1990s, I found $100. It was 5 $20 bills, so it kind of counts, on the sidewalk outside my apartment. No one was within 100 feet of us when I picked it up. The man who lived across the hall was right behind me, and he couldn't believe it either. My girlfriend and I went to Coors Field and watched a game. We had some sausages outside before and a couple of beers at the game. We had just enough left over for both of us to go to Six Flags. It was an amazing weekend. I still can't believe how lucky we were. Story 28. My friend Dr. Wong is a ketamine therapist. He charged me $20 for an experience at Land's End Park in San Francisco, California. It was a transformative experience and one of the best moments of my life. Story 29. Years ago at my friend's bachelor party, a different friend got a lap dance. The entire night he kept saying, "Best $20 I've ever spent. You should try it." Story 30. A set of crochet hooks and some yarn. Crochet helped me stay sane after a work injury. I could barely walk to my mailbox for 2.5 years. I needed something productive to do with my hands. I was a mechanic and welder most of my life, so not being able to work on my trucks or do do-it-yourself projects and being home all day every day was making me stir crazy. Story 31. Landry's Club membership was purchased on a whim after a few beers from a persuasive server at a restaurant in Anaheim, where we visit about a dozen times a year. We had no idea how to use it when we bought it. Turns out that if you are a member, you skip the hour-long line and get seated immediately. There are also various discounts throughout the year, including during your birthday month, and you earn $25 for every $250 you spend. Not bad for a one-time $20 fee since Landry's includes around 75 restaurant chains across the country. Story 32. Perfect evening, movies, dinner, and enough leftover change to feel just a bit wealthier than before. And of course, let's not forget the grand finale. A little surprise to round things out. Whether that means I will leave that to the imagination. Sounds like a budget well spent. Story 33. Bissell Vacuum Featherweight. Cost $19 6 years ago. It is $35 today, which is not a huge price increase, but I paid $19 back then and it is still working today. I love it for my small office. Story 34. Not 20, but I spent around 36 to buy a brand new handheld vacuum. It was a game changer cleaning the house with 2 cats. Story 35. A cheap rice cooker. It is easy to make a pot of rice and not have to worry about setting a timer. I just throw it together, and it comes out perfectly every time. Story 36. That is without question buying Minecraft about 13 years ago. I am still playing on that original account on and off today. Story 37. A gift for my then-girlfriend who was crying after an argument with her grandfather. I bought her some Chinese food. The next day, we went to get dessert to bring home, but she paid for it and did not allow me to pay. Story 38. My welding hood. Work bought me a $600 hood. But you know which one I use? The cheap flip front from Princess Auto and Harbor Freight. It's just good. Story 39. Complete books and works of this 19-year-old yoga instructor I found for sale. She impressed me because there were a couple of hard-to-find books included. It was a great few months. Story 40. This one time I was the only driver at Papa John's for the morning and we were very busy for hours. Then people kept calling out, so the boss asked if I would stay. I ended up working 8 hours before I took a lunch and 14 hours total. It was the busiest day I ever worked there because it was usually 4 to 5 hours. I was starving by my break and spent about $20 at an upscale Chinese restaurant. This was 20 years ago. It hit the spot in that moment so good. Story 41. Rescued an amazing cat a few years ago. He was 9 to 10 years old, one-eyed tuxedo. Toby was a great cat. And while I only had 14 months with him, he got super spoiled and a little chunky since he was underweight. Not a day goes by that I do not think of him. Story 42. The most poignant $20 was 2 tickets to a local theater play. I asked 4 women, one after the next over the course of a week, if they would accompany me. Each of them turned me down, saying they were not interested. I ended up taking my aunt to the play so the tickets would not go to waste, but I was crying inside. While painful, I do not regret at all having purchased those tickets or asking those women out. On a more positive note, the most useful $20 I ever spent was an impulse purchase of 20 combination wrenches at ACE Hardware 20 years ago. I have beaten on those wrenches hard, and they have been nothing but dependable ever since. Story 43. I saw the Los Angeles Dodgers in really good seats last year for $20. I have seen them plenty of times, but it was like $20.10, and I loved that deal. Story 44. An Uber from the bar to my condominium after I have had a few too many, usually around $20. I get home safe and sound every time. Story 45. About 10 years ago, I was driving in North Carolina. I needed gas, so I pulled into the nearest gas station in the middle of nowhere. It was a tiny place with only 2 pumps. I got out of the car and smelled mouth-watering hamburgers. Part of my brain thought, do you want worms? Getting gas station hamburgers is how you get worms. But the other part of my brain said, food smells good. So I went inside to take a peek and saw they had an actual stovetop grill with sizzling hamburgers being freshly made. I bought some gas and ordered a hamburger. Best hamburger ever. It was about $20 for the gas, burger, and a drink. Why does 10 years ago feel more like 30? Story 46. I bought a reciprocating saw at Harbor Freight for about $20. I have cut up a lot of materials with it. I had to buy new blades a few times, though. Story 47. A vintage camera that I can still use film with. It is an early 1980s Minolta. Sadly, it was not treated well by the previous owner and is very dinged up, but it still takes wonderful shots. Story 48. I think it was a little under $20, but my first cane. It was an impulse buy from a grocery store when I was 18. Within months, I went from barely using it to needing it nearly every time I walked. I knew my conditions were getting worse, but I had no idea at the time how soon they would really get bad. I still have that cane somewhere around here, even though a stick cane is no longer sufficient for my needs. It is useful for picking up some things I drop. Story 49. $20 hit on a roulette, but it was placed on a split of 2 squares, not a single number. So instead of winning $700, it was just $350, but still. Story 50. At 18, I went to one of those tattoo parlor events where you can get a 1 by 1 inch tattoo for $20 in October 2019. I was in a very low moment in my life, severely depressed despite having a lot of exciting things happening as I had just graduated high school. I chose to get the semicolon as a tattoo, and honestly, I love it very much. I don't regret the $20 at all. It has a lot of meaning to me, especially as the years have gone by, as I've lost close people to suicide years after getting the tattoo. The tattoo also reminds me of the crazy day when I got it. In a very short summary, while in line for the tattoo shop to open, a car crash happened right in front of it. More than 50 people waiting for the tattoo event, including me, became witnesses to the crash. No one was severely hurt, luckily. I walked to a store to get a lime while waiting when a police car parked by me to question a homeless man for jaywalking in front of them. I got the lime, walked back, and still had to wait. I finally got the tattoo, Rushed home as I was running late to a Halloween party that night. Made the guacamole I promised to make, hence the lime. Then went to the Halloween party, which was honestly one of the most fun parties we had. It was probably the most eventful day I ever had, and I am not forgetting it for a long time. As it's just a 1-inch tattoo, it's pretty simple. The woman who tattooed it was newly licensed. I remember talking to her about her schooling and how she was doing this event to get more experience. The semicolon is one color, and there are some spots she didn't color in fully, but I honestly love the mistakes. For a tattoo like the semicolon, it just reminds me nothing's perfect, and that's okay. I see the tattoo every day, and with all the things mentioned, it's the best thing I got to spend money on personally. Story 51. Cup of lemonade from some children with a stand in the neighborhood. They were only asking for $1 per cup, and they were so excited I did not want the change back. Story 52. I forget exactly the price, but it was very inexpensive. In 1998, I saw a 4-band show at the Boathouse in Norfolk, Virginia. The first band was by far the best, and it turned out they were System of a Down. It was a great show. The Boathouse was a low-quality venue that hosted some of the best bands of the 1990s, many before they became famous. Story 53. When I was a poor college student in the early 1980s, my father would send me a random $20 from time to time and tell me to buy my friends and me pizza. I miss him. Story 54. About 20 years ago, I bought a set of drums at a garage sale for $20. They were an imported set of pearl drums from the 1960s that were filthy and rusted. But the real prize was the 5 vintage Zildjian cymbals that came with the set. I sold the cymbals on eBay for around $600. I cleaned up the drums and listed them in an eBay auction for parts. I was contacted by Eric Singer's manager, Eric being the drummer for the band Kiss. He said Eric was interested in the drums and wanted to know if I would end the auction early. I said to make me an offer, to which he replied $200, and I said, deal. About a month later, the manager sent me another email to say that Eric was thrilled with the drums. He added that Kiss would be playing in Cincinnati in 2 weeks and asked if I would be interested in going. I said yes, so 2 weeks later, my wife and I enjoyed a pair of center stage tickets 10 rows back. The manager said he would have arranged backstage passes, but the band had to leave on a plane right after the show. Story 55. About 10 years ago, I bought a 55-inch television, which at the time cost around 800 to 1,000 euros. It was sold as spares with a broken panel, so it seemed like a lost cause. However, it came with a pair of 3D glasses, and I thought I could sell those for 30 to 40 euros, making a €10 profit. The panel was not broken in the usual way with shatters. There was just no picture on half of the screen. Could still have been a panel issue, but in this case, it was a manufacturing error. The panel ribbon cable was not properly inserted into the connector and was hanging loose. I reconnected the cable to the connector, and the picture was great. The television is still in use as my main TV. Story 56. A multimeter. It was a little more than $20, but you can buy them for $20 with the same features I used. I am not an electrician or engineer. I just watch videos and read manuals, and I have used it several times now, each time saving me an expensive repair. Over the last 3 years, I was able to diagnose and fix the outside air conditioning unit capacitor, microwave door switch, washing machine twice valve and pump, boat bilge pump bad wire, and furnace blower thermistor. I am confident that thermistor replacement alone, which cost $5, would have cost me anywhere from $600 to $2,000 if I had called a professional. Story 57. $18 for insurance on a rental truck that I had for a week, totaled, and walked away from without paying another dime or my insurance being affected in any way. Story 58. A bread machine. For less than 50 cents, I can make a loaf of bread that would have easily cost $3 to $4 at the store. Story 59. I put $20 into a slot machine the first time I went to a casino and made $33. That was pretty cool. Story 60. A bunch of Coca-Cola Zero bottles were on sale the other day. That was also the time I got 2 beers for me and my crush, and we ended up making out for the first time right after that. Magic. Story 61. My hook bill machete. I have made more money with it than it is worth. I doubt it is $20 these days though. Story 62. My cat's little sunflower perch and scratching post. She absolutely loves it. She sits on it like a gargoyle when I get home and gives me an earful about the fun night she had while I was at work. Story 63. A World War II German model 1942 helmet shell with dark blue textured paint and a bullet hole that fits a 6.5 Carcano round perfectly. Story 64. I'm overweight, so obviously the best $20 I've ever spent have been on the chicken strips and fries my hometown's pub sells. The only reason they're that price is because it's in a remote location. I think they put something addictive in it because it's not made by a professional chef. The fries are oddly damp and dry at the same time, and the chicken is moist like it has been steamed, but it was actually fried. The texture is great, and the taste is chicken. Then you have the gravy, which is probably from a packet and not made from scratch. I might have to visit my parents just for those chicken strips. The $20 is worth it every time. Story 65. I bought a $20 bidet on a Prime Day sale. The water is cold, but it is great. I bought it just to see if I liked a bidet, and I will replace it with the best. For now, it is the best $20 I have ever spent. Story 66. My border collie Moonpie was rescued from a shelter in Central Texas at the start of the pandemic in 2020. It was a $20 adoption special. I have said many times that it was the best $20 I have ever spent. He is such a sweet and smart dog. Of course, he has cost more than $20 over the years, but we do not worry about that. Story 67. One day several years ago, I decided to get Wendy's for lunch. I was waiting in line at the drive-thru when a homeless man knocked on my window and asked if I could spare some change for food. I figured why not, I'll give him $1 or $2. I pulled the cash out of my pocket and, wouldn't you know it, all I had was a couple of $20 bills. I would have felt really bad telling him, "Oh wait, sorry." So instead I said, "Well, I guess today's your lucky day," and handed him one of the bills. He thanked me profusely while I silently resigned myself to the thought that he'd probably spend it on drugs or alcohol. But sure enough, he headed straight into that Wendy's and came out again a few minutes later with a huge bag of food and the biggest grin on his face. As I watched him head back to his camp, I knew he was going to share it with his friends, and it made me really happy to think that they'd all have full bellies that day. Definitely one of the better $20 bills I've ever spent. Story 68. Well, technically it's multiple $20, but my medications were $20 each. The estradiol alone was definitely the best $20 I have spent. Story 69. Ashamed to admit it, but chat generative pre-trained transformer. I am going to school to be a programmer, not a mathematician. I used it to help cheat my way through statistics class. I could not afford to retake the class either. Story 70. My wife and I bought a few scratch-off tickets for $20. We ended up winning around $300 from a $2 ticket. That covered our rent and paid for date night that week. Story 71. I bought a couple of books under $20 that completely changed my perspective on life and got me out of the victim-blaming pit I was in. Best $20 ever spent. Story 72. An inflatable Tyrannosaurus Rex. We now have an inflatable dinosaur-themed off-roading club. It is ridiculous, but it feeds my soul. Story 73. A Ninja Chopper. It is like a mini food processor without all the features. I use it for many things. I bought it about 10 years ago for around $18 and it is still going strong. Using it for chopping onions saves me time and tears. Story 74. A small light with bendable arms. I put it on my dog's leash to find his feces at night to pick it up. It lasted for 8 years and cost $5. Story 75. An earwax picker with a camera at the tip. You can connect it to your phone, and it feels like performing surgery on yourself. Story 76. Multipack of compression diabetic socks. Much more comfortable than socks with toe seams. I am diabetic. Story 77. I was working a concession stand at the 1983 United States Festival. We arrived on Thursday during the sound check rehearsal. We slept on cardboard outside the refrigerator truck. We made 2,500 sandwiches to sell. I lived off that food and unlimited sodas for the next few days. There was dirt, Dust, noise, and people 250,000 the first day, 350,000 the next, and then back down to 250,000 on Sunday. My throat was caked with dust until I found the beer garden. I can't remember the price, but I bought an ice-cold bottle of Dos Equis. I tilted it back, and it washed all that dust down my throat. To this day, I swear that was the best beer I ever had. I bought another right after that one, but it just wasn't the same. I'm calling it the best $20 I ever spent. Story 78. I had friend-zoned this girl for about a year back in 2012. She was clearly interested in me, but I was too foolish to feel the same. I eventually came to my senses and asked her on a real date. I spent $20 on 2 tickets to the drive-in. We got married 2 years ago. Our first child is due in August. I couldn't be happier. Easily the best $20 I've ever spent. Story 79. Parking, admission for 3 people, and food to feed the petting zoo animals. I will always remember my 18-month-old systematically going around to pet each animal so none would be missed. Story 80. I carried a lot of back tension and pain when I was in high school from stress and trauma. I graduated, moved to Orlando for college, and was walking around one of their malls that had a Chinese massage run by an elderly man. He fixed everything. It was the best $20 I ever spent. Story 81. I was at a bar with a friend, and we were both having a good time and wanted to continue, but we were both broke. My friend found a $20 bill on the ground at the bar. We asked a few people, but nobody claimed it. We bought a couple of shots and a couple more beers each. It was a fun night. Story 82. I can't say ever, but recently I am probably getting a watch. They add style and, most importantly, they keep me from looking at my phone constantly. Story 83. My friend was broke and wanted to see his girlfriend. His girlfriend was also broke. We were the driving service for our friends. I spent $20 on gas. I knew I could count on her and she could count on me. It doesn't matter what challenges we encounter. She is my ride or die. Everyone else does not matter. Best $20 I ever spent. Story 84. It was the summer between 4th and 5th grade in the late 1980s. I found $20 in a mud puddle. I took my brother and a couple of my best friends to the roller rink. I paid for skate rentals, bought us all slushies, and I skated with my elementary school crush who was there that night. It was the end of innocence. As the night was winding down, my brothers and my name were called over the public address system. My friends' parents were there to pick us up. My dad was in a serious accident. We left, and as we drove past the Iowa beef processors plant, the police were breaking up a strike. Traffic was slowed to a crawl, and the tear gas they were using was seeping into the car. Not just my world, but the entire world seemed to be collapsing. My dad had been caught cheating on my stepmother. Her brother confronted him, and like a coward, he tried to run. Brad jumped in the back of the truck and tried forcing my dad to pull over, which caused my dad to wreck the truck. Brad was thrown out and was severely injured, and my dad was in a coma for 3 months. I recognized my dad's overturned truck in the ditch on that drive back into town. We got back to the Singer family's house, and I passed out on the couch. My paternal grandmother and aunt woke me up and took me to Sioux Falls to drop me off with my mom. That was the end of my childhood. Thank God for the $20 that took me away from that abusive situation and gave me the going away party I would have never gotten any other way. Story 85. I paid 20 United States dollars to enter a poker tournament online one night when I was very high. 7 hours later, I was sobering up because of an edible, and I had made the final table. I thought, what the heck, cool. Only after I was eliminated in 4th place did I realize I had just made 4,000 United States dollars. It was so shocking and hilarious. Story 86. Honestly, it was in a journal. That little book helped me sort through my thoughts and actually start living with intention. Sometimes the simplest things pay off the most. Story 87. Buying my first $20 of cannabis was a game changer for the management of my Crohn's disease. I am glad I did not start before becoming an adult. I rarely buy now and will start harvesting my next set of plants tomorrow when the lights come on in the evening. Everything goes to fresh frozen now. Story 88. I think the best $20 I ever spent was on a really good coffee one morning. Completely turned a bad day around and made it productive. Story 89. I bought a New Year's Eve ticket in 1976 for a Grateful Dead concert from a man at the San Francisco Cow Palace. Story 90. It was very fair to help a friend of mine who was having a lot of trouble. A few years later, he is still with us and mentions it every time we hang out. I did it because I love you, not because I had to. I know you are here somewhere. Story 91. I saw a neighbor's child enjoying pulling out weeds a couple of years ago. I told him he could work on my side as well and even borrow my tools. I gave him some ice cream and a $20 bill after he was done. He was overjoyed and so was I. Sadly, I have not seen the child since that day. Story 92. Found $20 on the sidewalk, walked it to the nearest liquor store, and bought a scratcher. Won $500, so that is probably the best return on $20 I have gotten. Story 93. 2 tickets to the first Friday variety show at the Vegas Theater Company. Enjoy lots of hilarious and interesting variety acts. Includes a drink. However, do not drink the drag queen jungle juice. My boyfriend impressed the crowd and me honestly, but I could not kiss him for 3 days. The sat-on cake was good though. Story 94. The Kentucky Fried Chicken drive-thru after a 12-hour shift of open road trucking in a rural area was in so much agony from hunger that my body was screaming at me to eat. I bit into a wing, and the just right temperature oil burst out of the chicken into my mouth. The rumble went away with a juicy, delicious bite. I washed those chicken wings down with a liter of Pepsi. Literal heaven. Story 95. $20 lounge chair off Marketplace. I worked at a place that had shift work. One of the men I worked with was a single father who specifically only worked graveyard shifts because it allowed him to pick up and drop off his children from school. We had a chair in our break room that had a slight incline, and he would take naps in it every time he had a break. One day, someone else leaned too hard on the chair and the backrest broke off, so he had to use the regular chairs to take his naps. He told me after his shift one night while driving home that he was so exhausted he accidentally fell asleep in the middle of an intersection. Luckily, it was about 6 in the morning, and barely anyone was on the road. No one was hurt. A police officer saw it happen and later checked on him to make sure he was okay. I went out the next week and found a simple leather recliner that would fit in our break room. Needless to say, he takes much better naps now, and as a bonus, everyone uses the chair to relax better during long shifts. Story 96. 2 tickets, $10 each, to a professional soccer game. Took a girl there as a surprise second date. I am a huge soccer fan and had no idea if she was. She was not, but she loved the experience and grew to love the game. We married a couple of years later. 20 years later, we still go to professional games as dates. Story 97. $20 to buy and throw a hand grenade in Cambodia. Regretted not paying $200 for the rocket launcher though. Story 98. During the Great Weed Drought in the summer of 1985, when President Reagan cracked down on all the weed dealers so that crack cocaine could move in, I ran into a guy who needed money for a bus ticket. He pulled out this cannabis that was almost black and so sticky that it had crushed flat in his pocket. He claimed it was a third subspecies called dwarf Afghan. I gave him $20 for maybe 2 grams, and I thought it was a ripoff, but I hadn't seen any cannabis anywhere in months. This was some of the greatest cannabis I ever smoked. For like 20 years to come, a mind-melting high not unlike the indica sativa strains available now. I lived off those 2 buds the whole summer, one tiny pinch at a time, and even got my whole crew intoxicated for the premiere of Return of the Living Dead. Story 99. The best $20? This clearance toolkit I grabbed after college. 7 years later, and it has saved me from landlord conversations, introvert win, made me the IKEA expert, rescued my cat from behind appliances twice, convinced my in-laws I am a functional adult, best impulse purchase ever, 10 out of 10 would buy again. Story 100. An Uber after a party. Our designated driver decided to have a few drinks and came out absolutely intoxicated. He kept saying that he was good to drive and that he would take us all home. No way. I ordered an Uber and got all of us a ride to the bus station so that we would all make it home safely. It took 3 people carrying and pushing our former designated driver into the Uber, and he kept claiming that he was good to drive for the entire ride. He finally gave up and accepted that he was not fit to drive when we got to the bus station. We all eventually made it home safe despite having to wait for buses. Story 101, Risk of Rain 2. I have spent over 1,500 hours on that game and enjoyed every second of it. I got it for $14.99 when it was first released and have been recommending it ever since. Story 102. Those small plastic steps on AliExpress that fit under your toilet. I do not know their proper name, but when you place your feet on them to defecate, they align your colon more closely to the natural squatting position that humans evolved for. Story 103. A big box of blue Lego cards gave me many of the golden 139 and 140 cards that I really liked. I also knew which packs contained them and the pack trick, like in Pokemon cards, to put the shiny card last. This way, I only opened bad packs. Story 104. Little keyboard foam wrist rest. With how much time I spend at my desk, it is a game changer for wrist pain. Story 105. Easy, the Uber ride to a barcade where I met the man who became my best friend and my husband. Story 106. When I was in my teens, my parents had an alpaca and llama farm. I bought a goat for $20 as a pet. He was absolutely awesome. He followed me everywhere and even went for rides in the truck once in a while. He was a riot. Story 107. My little brother told me about this awesome new game on Steam where you drive cars around a stadium and try to hit a ball into a goal. He said there is turbo and you can fly. He, our friend, and I all bought the game on a whim and tried it that night. That $20 has brought us thousands of hours of happiness. We do not play as much today, but we still hop on now and then. I am not kidding. The time I have spent on that game with my little brother has been priceless. Story 108. For nearly a year, I had been battling a losing fight against my television remote. Most of the buttons barely worked, and those that did required a hard push to function. One day, I picked it up and felt something crusty on the underside. I discovered that one of the batteries had leaked. I noted the serial number and threw the remote away. Then, I ordered a cheap universal remote control from an online retailer. When it arrived the next day, it was like a breath of fresh air. It worked perfectly, and my only regret was not replacing it sooner. Story 109, Valheim. I was really going through it during the lockdown and COVID-19 pandemic, and this was my escape for a few months. I managed to put nearly 300 hours into it before putting it down, and that was back at launch. I haven't really played since then, but I'm looking forward to picking it back up for the official version 1.0 release. Story 110. Imported German embroidery scissors in 1985. Sharpest pair of small scissors ever. Perfect for trimming my mustache back in the day when I wore one. I used them for years to remove sewn-on patches from my army uniforms and then scout uniforms after I had children. They are mainly just for cutting loose threads now or the occasional stray nose hair. I have never had to sharpen them in 40 years. Story 111. Probably the Pizza Tower game. I live in Brazil, so converting it was about $7. This game inspired me to start considering making games for real. Story 112. I mean, this is really old, but when I first got my job, I came home late one night covered in rashes from doing dishes. I had to listen to my mother yell at me for a solid hour. When I said, "If I give you $20, will you please be quiet?" I just slammed the money on the table and went upstairs. She realized that day I would do anything to get her to stop talking. Story 113. Let me explain. I was a very shy and timid guy. I was very self-conscious and keen on doing the right thing, so I waited for girls to make the first move, like kiss me, because it felt like I was taking their honor, whatever that means. I think it was just fear, which obviously never helped. Basically, I was a 20-year-old virgin who couldn't bring himself to even kiss a lady, let alone have sex. One day, I decided to hire a sex worker. I remember I couldn't climax because anxiety and fear were taking over. She was nice and patient for $20, though. After that, I found out pretty fast that not only was it easy to kiss girls, but it wasn't that hard to get intimate either. I became very interested in dating for a few years. Best $20 I ever spent. Would recommend, especially if you are shy and timid. Be safe though. It's better to go with a friend. Story 114. Bought my first dog, Alice, from an animal center when she was a few weeks old. She lived to be 13 years old and passed away in September 2024. She was my first best friend forever. She was with me through primary school, high school, university, and my work life, basically most of my life. I hope you are okay, Alice. I miss you. Story 115. This woman was buying my old car. It had issues, which I explained to her, but she wasn't paying close attention. The air conditioning did not work, but there was a switch under the dashboard that had to be turned on. It was a 20-year-old car, and the heat and air conditioning still worked. When it came time for payment, she paid me in cash. As she was counting the money, a $20 bill fell out. She picked it up, pocketed it, and kept counting as if it was in the pile. I let her keep it and didn't say anything because I knew she would never call me to ask about the car after that. Best $20 I ever spent. Story 116. Taylor Swift's Eras tour tickets in Vancouver were excellent. The tickets were technically around $17 for obstructed seats, but I honestly saw about 80% of the performance. She moved back and forth on the long stage so we could see her most of the time. The only exception was anything happening on the main stage. There were also large screens at the back, making it the best deal a Taylor Swift fan could ask for. Story 117. If I have that $20, I will send it to my daughter in school to buy books and for food. Please, if any of you have clothes for a 16-year-old that you want to dispose of, you can send them to me. I am in Nigeria. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.